and welcome back to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Russia launched more than 200 missiles and drones at Ukraine's energy grid on Sunday, killing 7 people in its largest scale attack in recent months. Now, following the aerial assault, the New York Times reported that President Biden authorized the first use of U.S.-supplied long-range missiles by Ukraine to strike deep inside Russia. Now, to discuss these newest developments, I'm joined by Peter Dickinson, chief editor of the Business Ukraine magazine. Good morning, sir. Thank you so much for being with us here on World Talks this morning.
Good morning.
Sir, before getting into Biden's decision, there's breaking news coming out here, reports coming out of Bloomberg this morning that at the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro, Turkish President Erdogan is apparently going to suggest that Kyiv agree to delay discussions on joining NATO for at least 10 years as a concession to the Kremlin. What more can you tell us about this, or what do we know about this?
Well, discussions about delaying Ukraine's NATO accession, or Ukraine's NATO ambitions, I should say, at this stage, there's no invitation to join NATO, but to talk of delaying that process as a way of bringing Russia to the negotiation table is nothing new. We've heard this many, many times, and it's been suggested by different sources. A number of sources who've been cited in the US media suggest that this is one of the things that the incoming Trump administration is considering. The talk has been of a 20-year freeze on Ukraine's NATO ambitions. So what Erdogan is reportedly about to suggest, or considering suggesting, is certainly not unprecedented. It's part of a broader trend of countries looking to somehow essentially appease Russia by saying, okay, listen, we can't say no to Ukraine's right to choose for itself, but what we can say is we'll delay that for long enough for it not to be an issue today or in the immediate short term.
What kind of response can we expect from Ukraine to this news?
Well, the Ukrainians have always said that it's up to them where they go and what they do with their country, what they do with their defense. They've been very clear that any delays would be encouraging to Russia, would be seen by Russia as victories, and would encourage Russia to push further. If Russia is able to veto Ukraine's natorship of NATO via the use of force, why can't Russia therefore then use the same logic to force NATO to rethink its positions elsewhere in the region, in the Baltic states, for example, in other countries where NATO is already present, or where NATO is strengthening its positions. Another country where this would certainly be relevant would be Georgia in the Caucasus region. So Ukrainian officials have always said it's up to them, it's not up to Russia. And if the West acquiesces in Russia's demands, then it will be a very slippery slope. We may well soon find that Russia is calling for all sorts of freezes, all sorts of blocks, and all sorts of NATO retreats. It's worth remembering that on the eve of the full-scale invasion, Russia presented the West with a list of demands, including the withdrawal of NATO forces back to where NATO was in 1997, which would mean NATO essentially withdrawing from much of Central and Eastern Europe.
Right now, sir, let's go to Biden has under 2 months left in office now. His decision to allow Ukraine to use U.S.-provided missiles to strike targets within Russia definitely marks a significant shift in policy. Now, what does this mean for the dynamics of this war moving forward? Is this going to impact relations between the United States and Moscow?
Yes, it most certainly will. It will impact a lot of aspects of the war. On a practical level, this allows Ukraine to strike back in the Kursk region in particular, but one would assume throughout the border regions. The weapons we're discussing are not, they do not have a range of thousands of kilometers, so most of Russia will still be out of range. But these American weapons, these ATACMS missile systems, do have a range of around 300 kilometers, so they'll be able to strike quite deep into Russia in the border regions. that will make it much more difficult for Russian logistics militarily. Ukraine will target things that Russia can't move out of the way. So ammunition dumps, logistics hubs, army bases, airports, things like that. So it will have a practical impact on the war for certain. It could be quite a significant impact. But I think beyond that, it also changes the equation here, because it crosses one of the big Russian red lines, which is the idea of Ukraine using Western weapons inside Russia. Now, America has essentially said, okay, we're going to cross that line. For a long time, they didn't. Now they have. So now that opens the way for other countries to also say, okay, we allow our weapons to be used in Russia. And it removes the safe haven, the benefits that Russia had from these policies. For a long time, Russia was able to attack Ukraine with a sense of impunity, because they felt, well, we can't be hit back. Now, Ukraine will have increasingly the ability to strike back and to defend itself inside Russia as well.
Well, how likely is a decision to provoke a strong response from Moscow?
Well, Russia has threatened to respond strongly. Putin has said very specifically about this issue. He said, if the West allows these long-range strikes, the West will be at war with Russia. NATO will be at war with Russia. So by Putin's own logic, America is now at war with Russia. Now, that obviously demands a very strong response. But we already have virtually the whole Russian army deployed in Ukraine. Russia destroying entire Ukrainian cities fairly routinely now, it should be noted. Millions are displaced, hundreds of thousands are feared dead. You know, the scale of destruction in Ukraine, it's difficult to see where the escalation will come from within Ukraine unless Russia deploys nuclear weapons. Now, if they don't do that, then the opportunity for escalation, or the most likely arena for escalation, will be international, and it would see Russia trying to arm and support anti-American forces, anti-Western forces, like the Houthi down there in the Red Sea, perhaps also like Hezbollah, Hamas, people like this, organizations like this, countries that can harm the West and harm Western interests around the world. Because in Ukraine itself, it's not clear where the escalatory option could come from. We could also see hybrid attacks on the West escalate, cyber attacks, things like that.
Peter, let me ask you this. If Donald Trump comes to the office, is he going to be able to reverse the policy once he becomes chief?
Yeah, why not? He can do anything he wants. He has a very strong mandate for the American people. He will be very confident coming into office. I think he'll have no qualms doing that. Having said that, of course, it wouldn't look like a very strong move on his part. Donald Trump has been very clear for a long time throughout the campaign and even beforehand that he wants to settle this war via negotiations, via a so-called deal. He wants to negotiate. Now, Trump, the businessman, knows very, very well that you cannot negotiate from a weak position. At the moment, Ukraine's position, therefore the West's position, is weak. Russia's winning the war. Russia is advancing. Russia is losing men, but is not particularly bothered by that. Putin doesn't really worry too much about the loss of men. He's gaining ground. He's winning. The Western alliance in support of Ukraine is showing signs of weakening.
Mm-hmm.
So all the signs point toward Russia gradually gaining the advantage here. It has very little reason, really, for Putin to go to the negotiating table and make concessions. So Trump coming in has to strengthen his position and the West's position. Now, if he chooses to do that by immediately removing some of the bolder steps taken by his predecessor Biden, of course, that will not have the desired effect. So yes, he can reverse this. I think in practice he would probably find it certainly not opportune to do so, perhaps also very difficult to do so.
Thank you so much, Peter Dickinson, chief editor at the Business Ukraine magazine, for your breakdown and explanation of these unfolding events in Ukraine. Thanks for being with us here this morning. And that's all for this edition of World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. Don't go away. Up next, more news from TVP World.